Hey guys, I'm Amaroth and today we'll take a look at rocks, mountains, cliffs and things like that. So I have opened my tutorial map, but I have moved to this test zone here and we will use it basically for trying our styles. So let's choose some textures first. I don't have any reported stuff here, but that I don't really mind. Let's use, for example, Hollingfield textures. Let's paint some dirt here so you got some sort of background. So when you are creating rock formations, it is always the best to have ground texture, dirt texture beneath rock texture. So start with dirt and then we will apply some sort of rock. Another tip for you, I would suggest you to at least most of times use rock texture which is in a very big contrast with your dirt texture. So it is completely different in its, let's say, brightness. And I will show you why later, or soon enough, I should rather say. So let's make some sort of mountain. We have created such mountains in the last tutorial, and but this will be just for test purposes basically, just to show you how things work. Okay, this is our sort of mountain. And we've got basically two options now. We can either start with painting texture and then we can model our terrain based on that texturation, or we can do exactly the opposite. And then we've got another two options. We can either make some sort of very sharp style, very edgy style, or we can use some sort of very smooth style. So let's start with texture and let's start with smooth style. So I will change my radius so it's quite low, something between 2 and 3 maybe, and my pressure to be around 0.40. How to do this, by the way? Space, click and move left to right, mouse. And how to change your radius, Alt, key, click and move your mouse to the left and to the right if you don't know this. So we will start with a texture. So we will create something, draw something like this, and we will just keep adding new flakes. We will just create such flakes of rock and just leave a little bit of dirt between them. Okay, and now we will go to erase tool and we will lower our radius, lower our speed. It's best to have speed under 1 basically if you want to be accurate, or you can bump it up a little bit, but in that case you will most likely need to polish it afterwards. We will just erase our rocks here. As I have done it rather quickly, I will need to polish them, so let's go to flatten blur tool and let's use blur tool. I'm using just linear flatten blur, I'm using just linear erase lower, note that. So you can toy around with it a little bit. If you erase something you haven't wanted to, you can always fix it by just drawing texture again. And well, this style can be applied to sharp, edgy things. So let's draw something and let's just now erase it. This doesn't really apply very well to each other because I need to follow terrain faces. So I need to keep painting around and so on. So if you want to make sharp edgy style like this, I would suggest you to first create your spikes. Even for such spikes I tend to use radius over 4 and brush speed over 2. And now let's just make such spikes here. Some spike here, some spike here. So this is the second way. You can also start with modeling and then you can texture it afterwards. By the way, As you might note, I'm following edges. Let's view it on wireframe. Here's an edge, for example, so I will follow that edge. Here's an edge, so I will follow this edge right now. And by doing so, you will avoid most of the time getting something like this. If you get something like this, well, you can always fix it with blur tool, then erase something, toy around with it a little bit until you get this, until you get some reasonable result. Okay, so now I've got my spikes and now I can texture them. So these are two ways of doing this. You can either start with texturing or start with modeling. I would recommend you to start with modeling when you are making anything sharp and edgy. Notice that I am not really doing something like this, just paint over it like crazy and done. You can't do this really. That really doesn't look very good. I'm creating sort of flakes and I'm leaving dirt between them. And this will help me make my modulation stand out a little bit. Those rocks will look like they are made of multiple rock formations, and it will look more, more 3D, let's say. It will have some depth to it. That's quite important. It will look more real. So I'm making flakes and I'm leaving dirt texture between all those. Now we would just move to grass texture. So let's use any sort of grass. I will lower my radius to 1 or even smaller, and I will just now start with outlining those rocks right now, like this. So just paint grass on the dirt between those rock flakes or rock formations, and let's just paint it around them as well. And the same would be done here, between them, around them. And now when I've got my outlines, I can just move to painting grass around without any issue. Okay, so this is just a very simple basic style, and I will show you another thing, and those are cliffs. How to make cliffs? Well, first of all, big mistake beginners tend to do is that they try to push their cliffs into mountainside. So they just like it like this, then they would do it like this. Notice that I'm ruining my bottom cliff. Okay, so let's finish this cliff. Let's move here. And those cliffs look a little bit like they are pushed into that mountain, and that doesn't look very good. When you make whole mountain full of such cliffs, it looks quite terrible actually. So let's not do this. Let's use blur tool to get rid of it, and instead let's extrude that cliff from that mountain basically. So we will use erase lower tool first. We will erase terrain here, so we will make some sort of spike here, and we will build our cliff based on that spike. So now we are basically sticking that cliff to mountainside. We are adding it, we are extruding it. It is not pushed inside, it's extruded. So this is a very simple way of creating a cliff. And now let's say that I want a smooth style. That's why I'm using linear flatten basically. So let's start probably with texturation. It doesn't really matter too much, but in this case I would start with texturation. I would recommend you doing so. So let's paint flakes here again. Let's again leave some dirt between them. You can even add something around, so let's make a hill here. So now I'm just painting texture on places which should be arisen. And now I will use erase tool, again linear, maybe increase radius a little bit, and I will just rise those parts. So I'm raising them. Now I will go back to texture, I will fix my all mistakes I have made and so on, to make that texturation match that modulation a little bit. Always make sure that your textures match your 3D version, that there is a reason for dirt to be here and not here. Texturation should always match your geometry, your terrain geometry. Now let's move to flatten tool and let's use blur linear again, and let's just blur it a little bit so it isn't too edgy. We've created a lot of edges, especially here, so you most likely will want to polish them like this. This is a style which is quite simple, quite fast. I have been using it for a few months or maybe even a few years on different maps, so it works. It is good enough, I would say. It isn't perfect, but it is simple and fast. And now I would just paint grass between them. You don't really have to paint the grass on very angled areas, so let's just leave a little bit of dirt here. You can do that definitely. And now again I will just continue with painting grass here like this. So this is a very basic style of creating mountains, either by doing this, this, or combining it between each other. You can make whole mountain of just such cliffs. You would create another cliff here, another cliff here, and you would call it a day. You can do that basically. And the last thing I would like to show you are sharp cliffs. So let's create some sharp cliffs, like in Hollingfjord, for example. So I will move to somewhere where is a lot of light. So let's make a spike again, and now we will use flatten tool again, but a flat flatten tool. I already use linear raise lower for everything and a flatten linear or flat. And that's basically it. So now we will use brush radius over 4, so quite a small brush, and we will bump our speed up. And now we are making a really edgy, sharp cliff. You can polish those things which didn't work out very well. And now I will just raise terrain here and flatten it. Always start with raising terrain. So those cliffs are extruded, so they are added to your mountain, that they aren't pushed inside of it. If you notice that these spikes tend to look quite well, usually, but you need to avoid having it too spiky. When I display my chunks, just what you see, if you start making cliffs in this direction, like this, it may stop looking very too good. So yeah, I will display wireframe. Hopefully you can see it. Well, maybe you can't, but okay, let's do the same somewhere where we've got enough of light so you can clearly see it on a video. So when we are following chunk lines like this, you may run into issue that you've got very spiky, very rough edge, and or you have a very spiky and rough bottom. You see this? That's not very pleasing. This doesn't look very good. So try to make your cliffs in diagonal direction always. So in this direction or in this direction. Try to follow either of those two, and this will in general produce better results. Another thing you can always do if something doesn't really look too good is go to raise tool, lower your brush radius, lower your speed, and now we will basically work with just with this one vertical. View wireframe, we are moving only this one vertical and nothing more. So you can use this technique for making very accurate earth formations for moving your terrain around buildings and so on. This can be useful sometimes as well. And well, let's get to texturation again. Well, that's rather simple and straightforward. Let's just paint those areas again. And again, don't just do something like this. A lot of beginners tend to do this. Nope, guys, this looks terrible. Nope. Try to make flakes. Don't just click and drag. Keep clicking. Keep creating flakes. Keep having places which are very bright, like this one, and then which are darker. You don't need to make 100 opacity everywhere. Still a very basic style, but it works. It is, I would say, more than good enough. I'm making flakes, I'm making different rock formations which are separated from each other. And now I would just again use my grass to outline those things, to paint grass between those rocks, like this, like here. And that's pretty much it. So this was a basic style of drawing mountains and rocks, creating cliffs and so on, so forth. I will cover a little bit more advanced tips and tricks in another video. So let's just keep this video reasonably short, and these are just basics. So try to experiment with these techniques, try to come up with your own style, create your own mountain in your test zone, and then afterwards move to your real zone and start creating your mountains like this. First of all, use dirt texture, then paint your rocks, and then when your rocks are all done, then move to your grass and make those lines between those rocks and paint, and then we will move to grass texturation basically. So I hope this was useful for you guys. Thanks for watching and happy modding.